things got out of hand. And some of this I take directly from Pentecostal historians who speak very favorably of Pentecostalism. So it's not like I'm going to the skeptics' newspapers, articles, the skeptic authors. I'm going directly to pro-Pentecostal sources, because the odd thing about all of this, if you are in the movement and you read a pro-Pentecostal source, for some reason, your brain has been trained to just shut off all critical thinking about what you read. I'm not like this. I read it and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that they just said that. And one of the things that is said by a pro-Pentecostal historian is talking about the money that flowed through the revivals with William Joseph Seymour, the man who everyone said was dirt poor, had no money, lived a very humble lifestyle. And I can't believe this when I'm reading things like this. One of the books that I read, which was written by H. Vinson Synan, and the book is entitled The Holiness Pentecostal Tradition, Charismatic Movement. There's a section in the book. It talks about the revival spreads, and it goes into talking about how the revival brought the curious and the serious. So there's this mixture of people. But it says this: a visitor to Azusa Street during the 3.5 years the revival continued would have met scenes that beggared description. Men and women would shout, weep, dance, fall into trances, speak and sing in tongues, and interpret their messages into English. In true Quaker fashion, anyone who felt moved by the Spirit would preach or sing. There was no robed choir, no hymnals, no order of services, but there was an abundance of religious enthusiasm. In the middle of it all was Elder Seymour, who rarely preached and much of the time kept his head covered in an empty packing crate behind the pulpit. At times, he would be seen walking through the crowds with $5 and $10 bills sticking out of his hip pockets that people had crammed there unnoticed by him. When I read this, the thought instantly went into my head, oh my gosh, that is a lot of money. Because if you know how inflation works and you do the math on the exchange of currency over time, $10 in 1906 is approximately $375 today. So if you have a bunch of these bills, you've got thousands of dollars in your pockets if you do the math on the inflation rate. This was not a small amount of money. I'm certain that the readers who read it today, if they buy this book, they think, oh, $5, you can't even buy a hamburger for that today. But do the math on this. That's a lot of money. That's more money than I ever carry in my pockets. And this is the poor, humble William Joseph Seymour who's going through the revivals getting that much money. Now, I know that instantly you're starting to think, well, John's going to focus on the money that Seymour has, paint Seymour as a bad guy. Not really. The thing about this movement that's really odd is that you can have very good people who have good intentions, who truly are seeking to find Jesus and seeking to convert people to Jesus, but get caught up in the system. And I want to talk about the system that Seymour was getting caught up into, because that's really the problem, not Seymour. If you understand how the system works and you've got suddenly all of these people who see this miraculous thing happening and think it's of God, which it may or may not be, I'm not going to make that decision, they instantly start pouring their money into it. And that's just how human nature works, which is really, really odd. And what does Seymour do? You can't just turn them away and say, hey, I don't want your money. They would think you're rude, so he just lets them stick the money in his pocket. And day by day, you're certain that if you think about how you would dress yourself, you're not going to dress yourself and put all of this cash back into your pocket the next day. You're going to stuff it in your pillowcase or whatever. So he's emptying his pockets day by day and then goes and fills them again, if you read what this is truly saying. So there's no way to know how many thousands of dollars that he made if you do the conversion rate. That's a lot of money. But the interesting part for me isn't so much the money that they gave him, because that's just a small sum. What's more important to me is all of the people in attendance. These people who were in attendance, the leaders of the revival were smart enough to take down their names and their addresses. And that becomes an asset. So every single person who attended this revival became an asset to the system. So instead of one person who's stuffing a $10 bill in the pocket and 5 people who don't have any money to stick in the pocket, now you can mail these people letters and they can send you money. And they might do it year by year. If you have a good or a service to give them, they will continue to contribute money. That's actually what happened. So William Joseph Seymour had this list, and there were people working with him, such as Clara Lum, a stenographer, who was working with Seymour and recorded many of the events. They combined the events with the names and addresses and started this publication, which was first published in September of 1906 from the Azusa Street mission, called the Apostolic Faith. And this paper had news, testimonies, sermons by William Seymour and other ministers. It basically became the main publication for the Pentecostal message. And at its height, I think it had somewhere around 50,000 subscribers. So we're not talking about any small number of people. This is a large number of people. And the value of that, as I said, every single person becomes an asset. It appears that Clara Lum and a lady working with her, Florence Crawford, they took the list, and Seymour no longer had possession of it. And they eventually began publishing the Apostolic Faith from Portland, Oregon. So William Joseph Seymour, who at one point had some money, could have been a lot of money, who knows, but he had more potential money through this mailing list, because as this mailing list began to grow, there was actually more sustainable money and recurring revenue that would come from the list. You don't find too many Pentecostal historians who talk about that split, because that would be devastating to the movement to find that the leader of the revival, the one who had large sums of money stuffed into his pockets, was part of an original scandal where 2 ladies stole this list. If they stole it, who knows what happened. But for me, it's interesting because what came later was the idea that these newsletters and these mailing lists could attract potential converts and potential subscribers and eventually build a business empire. So where Dowie had his original Leaves of Healing publication and his multi-million-dollar empire in Zion City, now you have the potential to create multiple different types of empires just simply by having mailing lists. And as you bring the mailing lists, which Dowie had learned this long ago, you bring the mailing list, you get the subscribers, now you have potential people to come to revivals because you can advertise your revivals in these mailing lists and the people will come. So this is a very, very critical piece of history. But from a business perspective, if you look at the Pentecostal movement as a business, which it did have to run and operate like one, this was a fundamental part of the business.